going to talk about alcoholism and how the family is affected. And alcoholism, if there's an alcoholic in the family, if there's a drinker in the family, if you have a cat and dog, they're affected. It affects everyone around them. And it is not the person. It is not the person. Can you hear me? It is the disease of alcoholism. It's the disease. And that's what we forget sometimes when we're in the midst of living with an addict, because it's not always fun to live with an addict, particularly if they're in the disease. And sometimes those of us that are addicts, we don't even have to be using and we can be difficult, So it is, families are very much affected, and particularly children. And I was thinking this morning, getting ready to do this, she's still trying to figure out that sunbeam. We don't know where that's coming from. But I got to thinking this morning, I went to an AA conference over the weekend, AA Al-Anon conference, which was wonderful, by the way. And, they do that count off where you stand up and you sit down as, there's my friend Neil. I was wondering where you were. Neil, there you are. Anyway, I just kept standing for Al-Anon. Anyway, I have 57 years in Al-Anon. I was the longest standing person there, and probably the oldest. But anyway, I have been around the program for quite a while. And, and I was thinking this morning, I went to some of my first meetings driving my mother when I was 11 or 12 years old. And, a kid shouldn't even be driving at 11 and 12. That's why people who are adult children of alcoholics, or if you know a child of an alcoholic, you don't have to feel sorry for people who grow up in the alcoholism field. Yes, we do take some blows. Yes, it's not easy. But what happens is children of alcoholics have to do things and learn how to do things at a much earlier age than other children do. I mean, just like driving at age 11. I remember for that 1 year, I drove Mother to an AA meeting, and it was on North Texas Street in Odessa, Texas, and there's a building, and it had a green door. And I wanted to go in there so bad. And they didn't have Alateens at that time. And but I wanted to go in there, and there was an old song that came out a little while later that called "What's Behind the Green Door." I wanted to know what was behind that green door. So it was a fascination to me. And Mother did stay sober that year. She did stay sober that year. But it is very puzzling. It can be very puzzling to children who are raised in alcoholic homes. And this is why one of the first things that people need to do, and it's usually the non-alcoholic that does it, and the non-alcoholic needs help themselves. They need help. And and what we recommend is go to Al-Anon. Don't just go in one time. Go to 6 meetings really close together and see if it works for you. And I mean, if you go to 6 meetings, I believe you'll be hooked. But Al-Anon, what you're going to learn in Al-Anon is what the disease is about. I always thought that I caused my mother to drink, and then I swore I'd never marry an alcoholic. I didn't. I married me too. And so I thought that I made both of them drink. Family members think we're pretty powerful if you think you can make someone become an alcoholic, because, I was overweight. I was, a rager. I was this, I was that. And so for the longest, I thought I caused my mother's alcoholism and caused my husband's. Of course, I found Al-Anon really early, and I'm grateful for that. I went in October of 1968. My youngest daughter, who's 57, she was a bed baby. She was a little baby, and I took her with me. And what I found there is that I was not alone, and I was not crazy. Well, that was questionable. But what that lit in me was the desire to get educated about what I was dealing with, about the disease of alcoholism. No, not about me, but about the disease of alcoholism. And I started going to, and there was very few things around at that time to, workshops or anything. And I certainly wasn't in the field at that time. But I noticed somewhere, that was before internet, I guess I saw it in the paper, where Father Martin, I don't know if any of y'all remember Father Martin. He's a beloved man in the fellowship. He's passed away, but I noticed, I'd heard about Father Martin, and I noticed he was going to be doing a workshop in Midland, Texas. And I lived in Abilene, and that was 18 miles from where my mother lived. And I thought, well, I can go see my check on mother, and I can go to Father Martin's. Father Martin is the one, he did what we call chalk talks. And what Father Martin did, he explained the disease of alcoholism on a level that I could understand. And I left there knowing that the alcoholics in my life, they were not bad, awful, and wrong. They might have done, some bad, awful, wrong things, but what they had was a disease. It was a disease of the mind and body. The disease, it's a twofold illness. Most diseases are single-fold. You either have a physical disease, where you have, pneumonia or allergies or something, that's physical. Or you might have a mental health diagnosis. You might have bipolar, you might have depression, you might have anxiety. But guess what? With alcoholism, with any addiction, we get it both. It is a physical allergy of the body coupled by the mental obsession. And what we find is that the main problem lies in the mind. If you want to know what your problem is, go look in the mirror and say, good morning, problem. The disease, if you're an addict of any sort, alcohol, food addict, any kind of addict, the disease lives in our head. It is a mental, an emotional, and a physical disease. And both sides have to be treated. And so the family needs to very much be educated. And children get educated all the time at school. Why not educate them about the disease that is in their, that runs in their family? This is what I've told people for years. Set your children down as young when they are at the age that they can begin to comprehend. And if they have a grandparent that's an alcoholic, or an aunt or an uncle, if alcoholism runs in the family, teach it to the children. Teach it from a disease point of view, not your uncle got drunk and got in jail and blah, blah, blah. Teach it from the disease point of view, because if your children come from the disease of alcoholism, they have a very high chance of winding up being alcoholics or drug addicts themselves, or find some other form of addiction to ease the pain of living. So that's one of the things with children of addicts and alcoholics, is educate those kids about what alcoholism is. One of the things that talk about blackouts, let them know what a blackout is, because an alcoholic can be in a blackout, and it's alcohol amnesia. They can be in a blackout and say things, promise things, be the sweetest, nicest person you've ever seen in your entire life, and the next morning not remember one word of it. They'll think you made it up. And then as family members, we get to doubting ourselves. Well, maybe I did make that up. Maybe that's just what I wanted him to say, you know. So teach your children and yourself about blackouts. When the alcoholic, I'm looking for a Kleenex because my nose is running. When the alcoholic is in a blackout, they will not remember what they've done. They are not kidding you. They're not pulling the wool over your face. They don't remember. You know, they can. I remember one time my husband came in, and I've been up 3 days waiting for him, but anyway, nevertheless, he came in, and I went out. It was early in the morning when he got in. He went to bed, and I went out, and I noticed he'd had a car wreck. Till the day he died, he did not remember having a car wreck. That is how bad blackouts are. He was in a blackout when he had the car wreck, and he just probably just straightened it up and just went ahead and found his way home. So, education. Educate your kids about the disease of alcoholism, and explain to children when there's chaos and fear and confusion. Let them know that recovery is possible. They can even recover, you know. And in today's time, I know I was figuring out this morning, I was age 11 when I drove my mother to AA meetings in Odessa, Texas. And then while I was there, you know, we did that for a year. And while I was there, I learned about Big Spring State Hospital, how they had started treating alcoholics. So at age 13, I was 13, she hadn't recovered, so I drove her over to Big Springs and admitted her to Big Spring State Hospital. Now, I was very large. I weighed 215, 220 pounds as a teenager. And so I looked much older than I was, and I dressed old. So they didn't question me at all. No one ever questioned me when I would take my mother anywhere. They didn't question that I was too young to be doing that. And so allow children to do what is age appropriate, because adult children of alcoholics, we grow up we have done things that was not age appropriate all of our lives. We do things that other kids really don't do, you know, like buy groceries, take checks that you know, back in those days of counter checks, and your mother gives you a check and you know that there's not going to be any money in the bank, but you go buy groceries anyway with that blank check. I mean, you know it as a kid, you're writing a hot check, putting your mother's name on it. But it's crazy making for children to live in the disease of alcoholism. So you must teach them. You must teach them about the disease and that they didn't cause it, they can't cure it, and they can't control it. They can't. But they can get well from the effects of the disease of alcoholism. Absolutely, they can. If I had a choice, I have for many years, if I was hiring somebody and I had 2 people applying for the same job, and one of them was an adult child of an alcoholic, you can't ask that when you interview people, but if I knew that one of them was an adult child of an alcoholic and they were in recovery, I would hire them over the other one automatically. Because when you get an adult child of an alcoholic that's in recovery, my gosh, you have got you a crackerjack person, because most become, like I said, do age things that are not age appropriate. The only thing about this is for kids is that are raised in alcoholic homes. Because, the alcoholic's not there, they zone out with the disease of alcoholism. So they're focused on the drug, alcohol, how to get it, where to get it, how much do I need. So they're focused outside the family. even if they do all their drinking inside the house, they're still focused on the drug. The non-alcoholic is focused on the alcoholic. So there's really no eyes for the children. This is why we recommend for the spouses, whether you have, if you're man, woman, it doesn't matter. If you're a spouse of an addict, get help yourself. I've told this many times. I was in Al-Anon 14 years before my husband ever went to his first AA meeting. I just gave up. I didn't think it ever, and I got all right. I got okay within myself. And I could just love him where he was. I quit beating him up and making him bad, awful, and wrong. I understood his disease, and I went on about my life, and so did our kids. That's one of the things that he decided he wanted sobriety. He said he figured out one day he was going to sit there in his easy chair and drink himself to death, and they wouldn't be able to contact us because we were all having a good time or something. But anyway, that did get him, he says, to AA, is watching the change in me and in his children. So what happens in Virginia Satir, the grandmother of family therapy, gave us these roles. There's distinct roles that children play in dysfunctional or alcoholic homes, particularly alcoholic homes. I told you that the focus of the alcoholic is on the drug alcohol or any form of drug, and the non-alcoholic is focused on them. They're trying to help them, trying to, fuss at them, whatever. So those two are just intertwined together. And the children don't get a lot of parenting. So let's say they have a firstborn child, and this firstborn child, and it doesn't always fall in this order, but majority of the time it does. The firstborn is a lot of times will be the family hero. They look around and they see their mother, the non-alcoholic, desperately needs help. And so they begin to be almost partners with the non-alcoholic, and they will help them take care of the alcoholic, or they will take up slack for the non-alcoholic. They'll clean the house. The hero child, they're called the hero child. And this is the child that makes you look good, makes parents look good. They get your name in the paper from overachieving. This is going to be your straight A student. They're going to be very, smart in school. They're going to be very diligent in school. And they, in every phase of their life, they usually are this family hero. Like I said, they make the family look good. So this second kid comes along, and he looks around, or she does, and thinks that the hero is playing a very boring life, and they do not want to be like the hero, and so they become what we call the scapegoat, and they shake things up in a family. You go back and look at your own family. If there's 4 kids and you came from an addictive family, they may have played these roles. Or if you have 2 kids in the family, they'll split those roles and they'll play 2 and 2, So, but anyway, the scapegoat is the kid that their job actually is to take the focus off of the alcoholic and to take the focus off of the alcoholism. Now, they don't know that. But this is what happens in family systems. This scapegoat, they're the ones, they also will get your name in the paper from, slashing tires to stealing or running off. Not all the time will they be, do things to get your name in the paper, but sometimes they do. But they're the kid that is out of one thing into 1,500. They get your attention. Now, their job is to take the attention away from the alcoholic. And guess what? It works, because parents will come together even when they're in the midst of the disease of alcoholism. When you got a kid in trouble that's going to court, that couple will get together, the alcoholic may have alcohol on their breath. Maybe they had to take a drink in order to get up there to that courthouse. But they're going to come together for that scapegoat. The scapegoat has done their job. The scapegoat is to take the focus off of the alcoholic and to put it on themselves. That's what the scapegoat does. And then the couple will the parents will come together in order to, bail the cat out of jail or whatever, get them, talk to the high school principal, get them back in school, whatever you have to do. The scapegoat is the one that is the rebel, and they also take a lot of blame. Everything winds up being the scapegoat's fault. They take the blame a lot of times of the family. So then, there's the busy being sick, the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic, and they've got these two kids, and then they have another one. Now this last child, they hardly notice that they've even had a third child. This child is what we call the lost child. We could always tell when we got a lost child in treatment. Thursday we would be doing staff, with staff clients. We'd get all the clients staffed, ready to call them in, and we just kind of be kicking back, shooting the breeze. And then all of a sudden it would hit us. We forgot to staff little Susie or whoever. Invariably, that was the lost child. They play that lost child role in their family. They will play it in society because they have learned that that's a safe role to play. This is the kid in today's time that will go into their room. And they used to get on the TV. They don't bother with the TV now because all have cell phones. They'll get in there and they are masters at those electronics because they spend most of their time alone. That if you ever want to know what's going on in the family, ask the lost child, because they sit back and they watch. They do not want all the attention that the hero child is getting, the awards and all. Majority of kids raised in alcoholic homes are smart, intellectual kids. They can all make good grades like the hero. These lost child is much like that, but she or he does not want to make real good grades because they don't want any attention called to them. So they're going to be your middle of the road ABC student. They're just going to rock and roll along there with no attention called to them. And they'll be in their room. They're animal lovers. They are food lovers. A lot of them turn out to be your compulsive overeaters. They hide out in their rooms. But like I said, if you want to know what's going on in the family, ask the lost child, because they observe everything and they know how to stay out of trouble. And then they have this other child, and here this other child comes along and they look around and think, oh my gosh, this family is in trouble and it's boring and they just got all kinds of problems. This little kid will become what we call the mascot. This is going to be your joker. They're going to be your comic relief. They're going to make a joke about everything, and what it does, they hide their humor, their pain behind the humor. They hide their pain behind the humor. The lost child hides their pain by withdrawing and becoming invisible. And then, of course, the scapegoat takes blame for everything. And then, and we teach people how to treat us. So they grow up and teach other people how to treat them unless they get help in these roles that have been pretty much assigned to them. So the hero, like I said, becomes an overachiever or perfectionist. And when we would get ready to have family week, if we started calling the family, we'd go down the list. And, one of the first we'd just go down the list. And when we would call the hero child, the hero child would say something like, let's say her brother's in treatment, and the hero child will say, or that maybe her sister's in treatment, and the hero child will say, we've been doing this all of her life. She has acted out all of her life. She ruined high school for me. She did this, she did that. And no, I am not coming to anybody's family week. No. And then she'll pause and say, how long have you been in the business? How many people have you treated? What are your license? They want to know how qualified you are, and they will say they're not coming. But wild horses couldn't keep them away. You're going to get that hero child because they're going to come in so they can critique what's going on and make this treatment center bad, awful, and wrong. But usually, if you can get a hero child there, usually they can make the shift. They can make a shift because, after all, they are smart. And if they can come in and listen, we can see the shift in adult and those heroes. And they're just so eager to lay the burden down. They carry the burden of the family, and they're ready to lay that burden down. And then, when you call the scapegoat, let's say we've got the scapegoat in treatment. Let's say that's the one that's in treatment. And so when you call the lost child, we call the mascot. And the mascot is just so excited about coming. It's a road trip. Oh, I love road trips. Yes, I will be there. And they're making jokes over the phone. I mean, and you just love that mascot already, and they haven't even showed up for family week. They're just cute, precious, and darling. And invariably what will happen 9 times out of 10 is that we will forget to call the lost child, or we'll call them one time. If we don't get a hold of them, we'll forget to call them back. A lost child gets lost everywhere. They get lost everywhere. And so, we'll be thinking, oh, we forgot the lost, and we don't call them the lost child. We realize we didn't get a hold of one, and invariably that will be the role that they've played forever. But if you can get all 4 of them in for family week, what happens, you'll get to see how everyone played a role, and what those roles was to hold the alcoholism up. It wasn't the alcoholic, but it looked like they're propping the alcoholic up, but they are aiding and abetting the disease of alcoholism in their roles because they don't know any better. They don't know any better. The lost child, the hero helps the non-alcoholic parent take care of the alcoholic. The scapegoat gets in trouble to take the focus off of the alcoholic. Everyone has a job. The lost child just buries themselves in that room so they won't cause any trouble for the alcoholic. They do this intentionally. And then the mascot, thank God for the little mascot, because they do bring a little levity to the family. But if you can get them all in one room and get them to talking about their childhood, and see those roles begin to slip away. They wore those roles like armor, a shield of armor. That's how you survive in alcoholic homes, is by picking up those roles. And they don't serve us in recovery. And we've treated people that have tried to hold on to those roles, and they don't serve us in recovery. And so there is a big impact made on children that are raised in the disease of alcoholism. And one thing is they live in where there's no, everything is unpredictable. You never know what to count on. And I was thinking this morning, it's time for the West Texas Fair. It's been going on for years. I started wearing my cowboy suit this morning, but anyway, decided not to. But it's a fair and rodeo. It's a nice fair in our town. And it's something that we would look forward to every year. And as the non-alcoholic, not in recovery, we make these plans and we talk to the practicing alcoholic, and they're sober and they're excited to go to the West Texas Fair and take the kids. Everybody's excited about it. And he's going to come home early on Friday. And he's going to change his work clothes and get dressed. And I'll have all the kids ready, all 7 of them. And we're going to all be ready to go to the West Texas Fair. And he didn't show up. That's the heartbreak of alcoholism. And the story will be, well, there's some guys that came into the store. They were good customers, and they brought a bottle. I mean, we won't know this 3 or 4 days later. And because of the disease of alcoholism, that I didn't know what it was. I just thought he was drinking at me, and that he didn't want to come home because we had a house full of kids, But how he would explain it is, well, a good customer came in and wanted me to have a drink, and I was going to have 1 drink. And then the customer would leave to go home, and he would stay and drink the rest of the bottle, and then he would be gone for 3 or 4 days. That is the kind of alcoholism that we experienced in our home. That's what my kids experienced with their father, and the disappointments that happened with the alcoholic. And it is, everybody gets mad at him, just gets mad at him. I'd get mad at him. I wouldn't speak to him for days. No, I would. I'd speak too much. I'd holler and scream and rage and throw hysterical fits, and then I wouldn't speak to him, And then once you get into that silence, it's like walking on eggshells after a drunk. And they come back and try to make amends, like everyone's walking on eggshells. And there's just hypervigilance. This is what kids are taught in alcoholic homes, that hypervigilance. And then they get into fear of conflict. And that is put on them. Don't you say one word. You two stop fussing. Stop that fussing. Your dad's here now, and we don't want him to go drink. And, and the non-alcoholic says things like that. Dad's here now. He's here. Now, he wasn't here yesterday. He didn't take us to the fair. But now let's just all go love on Dad. And it is damn confusing to the kids. They don't know whether to sick them or come here. And so children then will develop this, they develop the shame and the secrecy in these rules. The don't talk rule, do not go to school or don't go out that door and say one thing that's going on inside this home. So children raised in alcoholism are taught not to talk about what's happening in the home. And they'll also, and my dad said this, I can hear him say it, when you walk out that door, the only people you can trust is the people in this house. You cannot trust anyone outside that door. Well, guess what? Those are the ones that I needed to have the most fear about, are the ones that's inside the home, not the ones outside. So you learn not to trust, and by all means, don't have a feeling. Children that are raised in alcoholic homes are not allowed feelings. Stop crying. Don't cry. You're going to upset your dad. Don't cry. Don't cry. You're going to upset mother. That's what the alcoholic would tell my kids. Shh, don't upset her, And so children then begin to carry their own anxiety. They carry depression. They become little people pleasers early on. And then they can have the anger, and they can carry that anger into adult life. And that's what I grew up with. I picked up my dad's rage. Children carry their parents' unresolved feelings. I picked up my dad's rage, and I became a rager. I looked at mother. She felt sorry for herself. She felt sorry for me. And so I began to have self-pity. So that's not a very good combination, to feel sorry for yourself on one hand and be a rager on the other hand. But that's what you pick up in alcoholic or dysfunctional homes. And so what happens? The generational cycle continues if there's not intervention and if there is not treatment. And the intervention needs to be for the whole family, not just for the alcoholic. I can remember years ago, the first year I was at the Serenity House. And by the way, the reason I went into the field of alcoholism was to help families and to help children. That was my primary purpose. And they would not let me at that treatment. We didn't, none of us knew. It was early on. But I knew that families needed help, and the board wouldn't let me formally have a family week or day or whatever, But when I had the opportunity, I would interview the children if the parents would let me. So I had this couple, and she wanted to meet with her husband alone, and so I put them in a room, and I got her permission to meet with her 4-year-old daughter and her 10-year-old son. She said fine, because she'd had a babysitter. I was going to babysit her she was visiting with her husband. So we got in my office, and I just started shooting the breeze with them, just visited with them. And the mother had a black eye and was bruised on her face. I knew what had happened. I had done the assessment. I knew what had happened. He had beat her up. She called the cops. The cops came. They brought him to us. So I knew what had happened. So I asked the 10-year-old, I said, why don't you tell me what happened the other night? What night? What night? Nothing happened. I said, what about your mom's black eye? She doesn't have a black eye. Children learn in alcoholic homes to lie at a very early age. Now, this little 4-year-old girl I'd given her some pen and paper, and she was drawing. I didn't think she was hearing anything. And she looked up and she said, you remember Daddy hit Mama and she screamed and you tried to stop him? Yes, he hit her more than once. So if you want the truth out of a family, you've got to go to the younger kids, because the older ones have already been taught to lie, to not take the secrets outside the homes. So there needs to be an intervention done with the children. And because what happens, many of them grow up and become alcoholics themselves. Many of them, if they don't become alcoholic, marry alcoholics, or both, will become one and marry one, or two, or more. And then what happens is that they struggle with boundaries. Children who are raised in alcoholic homes, there's no boundaries in alcoholic homes. There's none. And our healthy relationships. My relationships, what I was married as far as a relationship was my mother laying on the couch being sick, and my father, I call him my husband a lot, but he's my father. Anyway, and my father gone all the time, gone. And when he was home, he was raising hell. He was, a very violent man and all. So, I became my mother's mother at a very early age. And this is another thing. What happens is we began to do things as children of alcoholics or any dysfunction. We began to, I think I said this at the first, we began to do things that are not age appropriate. We do things like driving at age 11, paying bills. We do a lot of things that is not age appropriate. And so we're really not taught how to do things. We have to kind of just struggle through it and teach ourselves. So we grow up with an imposter syndrome. Many of your adult children of alcoholics have imposter syndrome because they have to make up how to live. Or now, the research is very easy. You can research most anything. But, if I was working at the Serenity House, and They had not had a board of directors since their director went to prison for embezzlement, and it had been probably 5 years or something. So I went into a very broke down system. So I put together a board of directors. I mean, I'd learned how to do that, in my courses. I got a group put together. And then I had them sit down. I had no idea what I was doing, nothing, zero. So I had called a meeting, and I baked a fruit cocktail cake and had a fresh pot of coffee. And every month I would do that, and those guys would call, "You're gonna have cake today?" So I got them there because of that delicious fruit cocktail cake that I'd baked. That was back in my baking days. But anyway, they elected a president, they had elected officers, and so the president asked me if I knew how to put a board meeting together. And I said, of course I did. I did not have any idea how to put a board together. And he said, well, let's set it on this date, and you have the paperwork done and by next month when we meet. I didn't know how to do it. So what I did is I had a friend that worked for MHMR, and I called her, and she said, well, come over here, girl, I'll help you. She gave me a stack that tall of their board meetings. How she got away with that, I don't know. But I took them, and I made us a book for our, to start. I mean, they thought I was brilliant, that board of directors did, because by the next month, I had all of their material there, and, their agenda and what to do. I didn't even know what an agenda was. So this is because adult children of alcoholics, they learn to improvise. They learn to tweak everything. They say they know how, because see, adult children of alcoholics think that you know how to do everything. They think other people know how to do it. And if they said they didn't, that they would look stupid. So we just say we can do it, and then we go research it and learn how to do it, but never feel qualified. And so we'll have that, what we call imposter syndrome. Okay, so one thing you've got to recognize in the family, that what you've led through as you grow up, you've got to realize, abnormal becomes normal, but you've got to realize that what you lived through was not normal. People don't live like that. Normal people do not live like children who are raised in alcoholic homes. I promise you they don't. And what the recovery is, what we recommend is, if you're an alcoholic yourself, go to AA, get yourself to AA, and you'll say, well, I didn't drink like my dad, or I didn't drink like my mother. Do you drink? Have you had any consequences? You've got one consequence that qualifies you for AA. You don't have to have 25. A consequence. Usually an alcoholic never shows up at AA without a list of consequences. It's the consequences, the pain of the disease is what gets us to the door. But if you're listening to this and you have a problem with alcohol, go to AA, give it a try. And then if you're family members, go to Al-Anon family groups. Go to 6 meetings before you decide where they have anything that they can offer you. It can change your life. Al-Anon can. It is life-changing. And, Bill W., the founder of AA, him and Lois, his wife helped him. She even helped him put those meetings together, and they'd meet in they'd go around and meet in different houses. And then they, got their house up in New York at Stepping Stones that built, Bob, right here on our Zoom here is he's the one that's in charge of our cruises, and he took us to Stepping Stones last year, which was a wonderful experience. And what happened is we got to see where a lot of the history took place was there at Stepping Stones. That is actually where Al-Anon started. We give Bob the credit we give Bill the credit for knowing that we needed Al-Anon, because he was going to his AA meeting one night, and they had spent all of their time together, and now she had very little time with Bill. And she got angry at Bill, and she took her high heel shoe off and threw it at him and said, "Damn you," in your AA meetings. And Bill knew then that she had gotten as sick as he had. And he didn't actually start Al-Anon, but there was a friend of theirs. It wasn't Anna that was later, that was Dr. Bob's wife. It was another Anna in North New York, Anna B. And she's the one that helped Lois actually start Al-Anon, and they started there at Stepping Stones, but it was the suggestion of Bill W. because he saw that his wife had needed some help as much as he did. So get yourself in Al-Anon. If you're an adult child of an alcoholic, give yourself the gift of going to ACOA meetings. They are different than straight Al-Anon. Go to ACOA meetings, because when they read that list of symptoms, if you grew up in an alcoholic home, bingo, you will find your seat there in ACOA, and you'll feel at home probably for the first time. So it doesn't mean, recovery doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning how you can live rent-free of the grip of it. Live free of the grip of the past. We don't want to continue to live in the past. Yes, we can all tell our stories, but we need to give up our stories. Be willing to tell your story if it will be helpful to someone. Otherwise, quit living out your story, and live in recovery. But be willing to tell it if it would help someone. Recovery gives us hope and freedom. And so share your stories with each other. That's what the 12-step program is sharing. One suffering person reaching out to another. And I'll tell you, if you've never lived with an alcoholic, a practicing alcoholic, or if you've never lived with a compulsive overeater, we're hard people to live with. We are not easy people to live with. And it would be so good to be able to talk with someone that has had the same experience as you have. My husband gets up and eats at night or whatever, whatever. And a lot of times, and I'm going to be talking about that next week, is the switching addictions. But right now we're talking about getting help for the family and the alcoholic. A lot of times, I went to that conference this weekend, and I started at the second one. We were there at the very second one, and that was in 81 that we were there. And I had my mother on one side and my husband on the other, with the purpose of taking them to that AA conference so they could get sober. Guess what? Mother never sobered up, and it took my husband 14 more years to make it. But I got in recovery. I got help. And that's the marvelous thing. You can get help whether you're the addict or not, And my husband was very glad that I got help. In fact, when he would go to his AA meetings, and particularly the open door, because I went to open AA meetings, I went Al-Anon meetings, I went anywhere I could go and learn about the disease in recovery. And I would go to 1 or 2 meetings a week. Did that for years, probably 16 years. And my people say, and I've heard him say, I don't know what my wife got up here. I don't know what y'all did to my wife, but I want what she has. She is a changed person. And how I was changed is I quit beating him up. I quit being ugly to him and mean to him, cussing him out, all that. So just remember, if you're hearing this and you live in the disease of alcoholism, remember you didn't cause it, you can't cure it, you can't control it, but you can absolutely recover from it. You can. There is hope for recovery, whether the addict gets sober or not. We want them to, but that's not our job. As non-addicts, it's not our job to get the addict sober or clean or abstinent. So that's what I have about children raised in alcoholic homes. In the first book that I remember coming out about adult children of alcoholics was Claudia Black wrote, "It will never happen to me." And when I read her book, I thought, oh my God, I didn't know it, that anyone else ever thought the thoughts that I thought. I mean, it really gave me a whole new way to look at the way that I was raised. And I will tell you, I've left this out. If we're fortunate enough for the alcoholic to get sober, I have often wondered what I would have done as a child and as a young teenager if my mother had gotten well. My whole life was around my mother. My whole life was taking her to meetings. My whole life was taking care of her. I had no friends, went to school very little. What would have happened to me had she gotten sober? I'd have probably been one lost person, you know. And so I've often wondered that. And, you know, I thank God every day that my husband found sobriety while our children were still all at home and still young enough to realize the difference between dads. And my husband didn't drink every day. He was a running drunk. And if he took a drink, we wouldn't see him for 3 or 4 days. You know, he would be gone. And then he'd come home and go a month without drinking, and he would say, "See, I told you I wasn't an alcoholic." And I'd say, "Oh, yeah, well, you haven't drank for a month." Anyway, we played that dance a lot. So, anyway, get yourself educated, educate your kids, and grandchildren. Now it's down into grandchildren. Educate those children that the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction is not, it doesn't mean their parents are bad. They might do some bad things, but under the influence, but they're not bad people. They are sick people needing to get well. And the family needs to get well so they won't enable the alcoholic to continue doing what they're doing. You know, people in AA kept telling me, "You are keeping your mother and your husband and your daughter 1 inch away from recovery." Because about the time they'd get to hurting bad enough that they'd want help, I'd rush in and rescue them, you know. And so, because I felt sorry for them and I loved them and I thought they needed me. Okay. And I needed to be needed. That's the codependent. I needed to be needed so bad. All right, that's what I have about children of alcoholics. Any of you grew up in alcoholism?